Okay, testing, testing, testing. Can everybody hear me? No audio. Okay. Okay, testing, testing, testing. Can everybody hear me? No audio. Okay. Okay, testing, testing, testing. Can everybody hear me? Okay, can everybody hear me? We'll try that one more time. Okay.
No audio.
Yes, can
Okay.
hear. Okay. Good evening.
Okay,
Patriots.
testing.
Paladin coming to you here from somewhere in the world. Will be your host. Got Kay or Lady Justice uh, riding shotgun, and I guess we'll give a few minutes here for everybody to populate. Okay, all good now. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Okay. Um, we are going through some transition here with our live streaming and everything. So if we have any issues, just be patient with us. We'll try to work them out, and hopefully, if we have any issues, they'll just be for this live stream, and we'll figure everything out, and it'll be all good. Okay, I see some do not consenters already. I love that. Okay, some of you may know that I did a interview with Carrie Cassidy last night on her Project Camelot channel, and it caused a little bit of controversy, and I'm not going to get into that. I'm going to take my grandfather's advice and take the high road, because there's no reason to sort of rehash things. But tonight, I do want to go over a few things that I wasn't able to go over last night because Carrie and I had been messaging back and forth as we have for the last probably 10 years. And we had been discussing this current COVID-19 situation since its inception. And she had wanted me to come on and do a live, and I sort of had resisted and resisted and resisted. And finally, she convinced me to come on. So I did last night. And one of the things I wanted to talk about that I wasn't able to last night was the fact that now that we're all home, or a lot of us are home through the day because we're not working and there's shutdowns and quarantines and all that, that there are a lot of people out there on the internet that are talking about things, and they're trying to, I guess, I don't know, build channels or build a following or an audience or whatever. And they're taking certain information, bits and pieces of information that they're getting, and then they're adding their story or their hypothesis in some cases, or they're adding their opinions to it, and they're rebranding it and putting it out there as their very own. And when it first started happening and sort of proliferated, I was just livid about it. I was just infuriated because it was egos that were talking, and they weren't coming from a place where they were trying to inform the public. They were trying to make themselves appear as if they were insiders. They had inside information, and that they were the only ones to listen to because they knew everything. And as this has evolved, if you're still following some of those people, you will see that some of the stuff that they said early on has not come true. And that's because they have taken information. They're not able to discern what it means. They think something, a 3 days of darkness means that the internet's going to be shut down and the phone systems are going to be shut down and all this kind of stuff. And obviously that didn't happen. There have been 3 days of darkness, but that wasn't what the 3 days of darkness meant. So that was some part of the stuff that we wanted to talk about last night, and we didn't get to that. And I just want to say about that, that you just kind of, at this point in time, with everything that's going on, you have to really click on your discernment, your common sense, and your critical thinking caps. Because if you don't, you're going to be so confused at the end of the day that you're not going to know which end is up. So that was one of the things that I wanted to talk about. Another thing that I wanted to talk about and really get into it is that um, I'm not sure that everybody understands where we are as a species or as human beings in this whole evolution of life. So I think that everybody needs to kind of sit back, take a look at what's going on here, because everybody is at various stages of, I guess, what I would say, waking up. And everybody seems to think that, well, not everybody, but some seem to be able to come to rapid conclusions on how to fix things and what should be happening and how it should be going and the timing of everything and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what I want to say is that I don't think everybody realizes the depth of the problem, because we're not dealing with a few years here. We're dealing with hundreds of years and in some cases thousands of years. So if you're impatient with where things are going, then I think it's time for you to step back and take a look at what you are doing to help bring the change about, because we're in such a deep hole at this point. We've all been asleep for too long. And as I said last night on Carrie's channel, it's like you have a physical ailment. And if you don't get that physical ailment checked or you don't address it, at some point it's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse until you have to go see the doctor. And the doctor has got to set you up for surgery, and you've got to get it cut out, because that grows and it grows and it grows. And so that causes pain. And if you would have nipped it in the bud when it first became a problem, the pain that you went through with the surgery and the recovery and all that stuff wouldn't have been as bad. So that's where we are now. So I just want everybody to understand that there has been a lot of stealing of our wealth, stealing of our freedoms and our rights that's been going on for a long, long, long time. And if you've just woken up to that in the last 2 or 3 years, then you've really got to go back and you've got to study history and you've got to look at it with discerning eyes, because this has been going on for a long, long, long time. And if you're a Trump supporter, or you are a person who realizes the difference between the white hats and the black hats, I guess I can give that as an example, then you have to realize what it's going to take to get the ship righted. And it's going to take a lot. And I think the thing that nobody wants to hear is it's going to take all of us. We were talking about vaccinations last night, and we can look at certain states, and we can look at certain states with the whole COVID-19 that's going on right now, and we can see, states are in various stages of lockdown. Now that the green light sort of has been given to open things back up, that we are seeing various time schedules coming out, various plans being implemented as far as the way they're going to do this. And the direction that it's headed in some places is they're going to there's going to be some places that are going to force test you, because they're going to force test you then, and then if you test positive or you test negative, then you're going to get the scarlet letter in some way, some form or fashion, either on your phone, or they're going to tag you, okay? And they're going to start monitoring your social distancing. And the next thing that's going to happen if they develop any vaccines is they're going to say, well, you can't go places, you can't go to the store, you can't go to the movies, you can't go to a restaurant, you can't go to school, you can't go to various places unless you have a vaccination. And so what this does is it puts the decisions on the direction of this country, and in a bigger sense the direction of the world, the planet, on your shoulders. Because are you going to consent to the vaccines? Are you going to consent to the testing? Are you going to consent to the surveillance and the monitoring? And that's a big part of it. So we've got to put ourselves in a mindset that we are going to participate along with Trump and the military and the good guys, the white hats, whatever you want to, whatever term that you want to put on the people who are trying to free humanity at this point in time. You're going to have to understand that you have a part to play in this. And if you're not prepared to play that part, then it's going to make it difficult. And if we're all together, if all of us are together, it's going to happen very, very, very fast. So those of you who are getting impatient with thinking that Trump is not acting fast enough, or your governors are not acting fast enough, then get involved and make the change happen faster. Okay? Because that's what needs to occur at this point in time. We cannot set back like we have for the last 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years and wait for something good to happen. We have got to make it happen. And we have our opportunities. Trump is allowing the governors to make the decisions. And so if the governors say, well, we're going to make you stay in for another month, then they're showing themselves. And this whole thing, actually, it was before Trump got elected, or before he got sworn in, but after he got elected, they started revealing themselves all over the place. And I've said this several times. The first thing they did was try to do a recount in a few states, spearheaded by the Green Party candidate. I think she's Green Party or Libertarian or whatever she was, Jill Stein. Well, and then the next thing was the threatening atmosphere that we had towards the electoral college representatives in December of 2016, where they have to make it basically official, go to Washington or go wherever it is to the state houses and do the official electoral college votes based on the popular vote of their states. And of course, you had some Democratic nut jobs that were willing to pay their legal fees if they didn't vote for Trump. And that didn't work. So now, yesterday or the day before, we see now the Michael Flynn stuff that's coming out, and you will see that they were ready. They started an investigation, and I don't know, it may be out there. They started an investigation on Flynn, and the field agents on January 4th said, well, okay, we're ready to wrap this up. There's nothing there. And Strzok stepped in and said, no, we can't close this down. This was January 4th. This was almost 3 weeks before Trump was even sworn into office. So they were trying to get this president out before he even took office, okay? And that is effectively nullifying the voice of the people in the election. And of course, some of you may know the story that they tried to fix the election, and the good guys went in and reversed that fix so that everything would go through the way it was, the real way, the way it was supposed to, and Trump won. Which those of us who were following this before the election and were talking to the private pollsters who were doing the polls for Trump and some of the other candidates, they knew that Trump was going to win if it was a fair election. So, which just goes to shows that the media, which is another subject that I'd like to cover tonight, just briefly. The media is not telling you the truth. The media tries to give you polls to influence you because they know how easily led we are. Okay. They say, well, here's the poll. So this poll says that Hillary's going to win. So if you vote for Trump, you're going to be in the minority. You're going to be the loser. So you might as well get on the bandwagon here and vote for Hillary. And they present this to you in the form of, do you think they're doing a good job? Is Trump handling the coronavirus pandemic correctly or incorrectly or whatever? So they're flashing these up they're still trying this. They're still doing this. It's just unbelievable to me. And I don't want to get off on that tangent, but I want to give you the examples of when they started to get Trump out of office, and it was before he even took office, and that nullifies the decision of the people, which basically takes our constitutional rights away from us, because we talk about our right to vote is one of the most precious rights we have. But if they take that out of our hands, then what's left? Because they're trying to take our guns, they're trying to take our free speech. And that's another thing we can talk about with everybody's aware of the censoring of the YouTube channels and Google and Facebook and everything else. And so do we just sit here and let them do it and continue to do it? Because the question is, in my mind, what is it going to take? Is it going to take us to get to the point where we have nothing to lose, where they take our jobs and they take our houses and they take our families, to the point where we don't have any choice, that we're going to have to fight back? Because if we wait to that long, it's going to be too late. So you've got to ask yourself the question: if my governor says the only way that I'm going to be able to go back to work or go back to school or go back to the grocery store or basically socialize in any kind of form or fashion, I've got to take I've got to take a test, or I have to enter into the surveillance state, or I have to get a vaccination. What are you going to do? Because that's when the rubber meets the road. That's when you're going to have to make a decision. And we've all heard, if we're paying attention, we've all heard about the nonsense that's been going on in Michigan, and we've heard about the nonsense that's been going on in California, and the nonsense that's been going on in New York. We're getting blasted with. I'm so sick of Cuomo in New York, seeing him talk every day. I just turn it off now. And it's not a coincidence that these are the same states that voted against Trump. And it's not a coincidence that these are the same states that have the vaccine laws, where if you're not vaccinated, if your child isn't vaccinated, they can't go to school. So it's interesting that when you bring that up to people in New York and California and the three other states, and there could be more by now, I don't know. I saw this map. I found this map the other day and I looked at it. It was 5 states: Maine, New York, California, West Virginia, and Mississippi. And there could be more by now. It could be an out of date map. And the only exemption that you can get from vaccinations in those 5 states that I just named was a medical exemption. Well, getting a medical exemption is very, very, very difficult. And in those other states, you either have a religious exemption or you have a philosophical exemption. So the interesting thing is, okay, those of you who are in those 5 states, if you are ones that say, well, I don't want to have to take a vaccination, it's interesting that you make that decision for yourself, but you didn't make that decision for your children when it went through the legislature and your local governments voted on whether they were going to take those exemptions away to allow your kids to go to school. So these are things that you've got to be thinking about, because we have to be together in this to go forward. And if we are together in this going forward, we're going to get this done a lot faster. Now, I was talking to one of my relatives before I got on here, and he gave me something that I wrote down, and I want to relate to you. And that was that those of you who aren't aware are afraid of the virus. Those of you who are awake are afraid of the government. And that succinctly puts it together. So it's time. And Trump is on our side. Like I said last night with Kerry, Trump is the only one between us and them. They are trying to get rid of Trump so they can get to us, but he's the only one between us and them, because they really want us. That's who they want. And if you've lived through a coup where they have forcibly removed your president in the sense of an assassination, then you'll understand the trauma that creates, and the problems that creates, and the long-term problems that creates when they're able to do it and get away with it. And my parents' generation let them get away with that. We've let them get away with 9/11. There was the Iran-Contra situation back in the mid-'80s that we let them get away with. And so if we don't stand up now, this is another situation where we let them get away with something that they shouldn't be able to do. So I think we've got to think about that. Everybody has to take responsibility, and you've got to get caught up. What better time to get caught up than all these hours that you're spending at home? You've got access to the internet. Get on there, look at things, research things, investigate things, and make your own determination. But at some point in time, you're going to have to make a decision on which direction you want to go. Okay. And I think we look at the people that are wearing the masks and the gloves and the whole 9 yards. I mean, these people are going to be the first ones that are going to line up for the vaccinations, because they are living their life in fear. And if you live your life in fear, then you're willing to give up your freedoms and your rights to be safe. And that's just an illusion. Okay. That is just an illusion. So, and I want to end with the situation with China. I think you need to look back on when China started infiltrating the United States, because it's been a while ago. And I want you to look at some of the senators and congressmen and even presidents who have facilitated that action in that situation, because that's where we are. And last night I mentioned the fact that the whole thing, the whole Bundy situation in Nevada, was not about Bundy's paying their their fees, their cattle grazing fees to the government. What it was taking their ranch and their land away to sell to the Chinese for their solar farms. And the same situation with the Oregon problem 2 or 3 years later, when Ammon went up there, Ammon Bundy and a few other people, and of course they basically assassinated Lavoy Finicum, who went up there to try to defend the Hammonds, who were put in jail because they wouldn't pay their fees. And I think that, that was about the uranium that was under the ground. And they were we all know that we should know. If you don't know, you should know the Uranium One story. And this was just another situation where they were going to sell our natural resources to a foreign entity. Well, in my book, that's treason. So we've got to watch out for China, and we've got to pay attention, because China has infiltrated the United States in a lot of different ways. And if you want to adopt the China model like Google has, where Google has developed a search engine based on the Chinese model, where they've censored all kinds of options that someone in China has when they try to do a Google search. If that's the kind of world you live in, then I guess it's time to get on your knees and submit. But that's not me. And with that, I will bring in my sidekick and shotgun, Lady Justice. How you doing tonight?
Good. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good, all things considered. So you have any comments to make on my way too long monologue?
Well, my first comment is, as I was sitting here reading the chat, that one of the comments that was made that stood out to me the most is Paladin, don't hold back. So I think you've done a good job of not holding back, although you seem to be holding back maybe a little bit. But all valid points that you made. I have several things I'd like to talk about, but one thing you and I were discussing earlier that we had a live weeks ago before we had the actual state of emergency called, I believe, if I remember correctly. And it was on a good friend of ours, his channel, where we had a live and we were discussing just the virus itself. And we had talked about some press conferences that Trump had done at that time. And I was in particular discussing my thoughts on a message that was being sent by Trump at that time. And it was in regards to trying to decipher or understand what his point was in some of the topics that he brought up. And the main point to me was the fact that he was trying to communicate to us without saying it, that this would resonate with us. It would be in our hands, that it would, most of these decisions would reside within our local governments. And due to the fact that, that we, the people, are really, we should be the gatekeepers for those decisions on local governments. And if they aren't what we expect them to be, based on, how we voted our officials in, that we have a responsibility to change that. And, we talked about this weeks ago. I can't really recall the exact date, but I believe it would have been the last live or alive before that, on a good friend of ours channel's the Truth Bomb channel. So this is something that I have said, this is something that I have felt for a very long time, but due to the fact that this is a situation that is impacting the entire world at this point, but I can only speak for myself, and I can only speak for what I am experiencing personally. And there is nothing more transparent, should be nothing more transparent now than to understand what power you have as we the people, and what you need to do about it, what you need to stand up and say enough is enough, that this is not something that I'm willing to consent to. If you comply with continuing to stay at home, being a prisoner in your own home, not being able to work, not being able to earn a living, not being able to socialize with your neighbors, not be able to peacefully assemble, practice your religious freedoms, go to the grocery store without a face covering, then you consent. And it is up to you. It is up to each individual to understand what their responsibility is, and understanding what was sacrificed for us so many years ago with our founding fathers, and understanding, why that sacrifice should be important every day, every minute of our lives currently.
Do you get the feeling that that's where we are? We're back in the 1770s.
I get the feeling that that's where we need to. That's where our mindset needs to be in order to understand how truly important the decisions that we make right now are. We really need to understand. And I do feel that part of the pain that we're experiencing right now as a nation is necessary in order to get in touch with why these things are so important. I do feel that that's absolutely where we all need to be as far as our mindset goes.
Okay. And I know you brought this up to me initially, or you asked me about it, if I was noticing the messages that Trump was sending with the press conferences, and you picked up on this almost from the start. Is there anything that you can recall right now, just to give a couple examples so that people can kind of relate to what we're talking about?
Boy, you're putting me on the spot. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? I've got a little bit of a background noise going on here. So can you say that to me again, please?
Yeah, when this first started, when the pressers first started, and they kind of started a little bit slow, and then eventually Trump, they were basically doing a presser every single day, including Saturday and Sunday, a few weeks. And I know you picked up on it right away, that there were messages that Trump was giving us, and he was going to the people, even though he would go up, he would give his canned speech, and excuse me, and then when he would open it up to the questions from the media, some of the way the messages that he was putting out there when he was answering questions that the media posed to him, they were actually they were answering the question in a way, but they were actually messages that he was getting out to the people. Is there any examples that come to your mind? And I know we didn't talk about this, but I know you picked up on it right away. And once you mentioned it to me, I started paying more attention to what he was saying, and I was saying, yep, you're exactly right. That's what he's doing.
I can't say in particular. There are several. I mean, I think every day there was a message. There was a message sent. I think every day there was something that was said. I mean, it's very important to pay attention to each and every word that was said, each and every phrase that he used. Where the press conferences were. We've all talked about the sealed and unsealed. From the podium and not having a seal on the podium. We've talked about the fringe on the flags that was removed yesterday. But most importantly, what I feel like he has said, and it's been very clear as he's talking about, there's a lot of hubbub right now as far as, there's a lot of manipulation of words and manipulation of information happening. And what is happening now is the latest thing is, that they slip a word or two into a headline as far as the vaccinations go right now. And all of a sudden that's turned into that Trump is, going to enforce mandatory vaccines. Now, I will put a disclaimer in front of this. I did not have a chance to watch all of the press conferences that were today or yesterday. I just haven't, personally, that hasn't been something that I can do. But what Trump has said throughout all of this that needs to be recognized is, number one, he has expressed that if it were necessary to do so, he does have the power to change decisions at the state level, to take over those decisions. And due to the fact that, that certain acts and orders have been put in place in the past, he does have that power. However, he has expressed explicitly over and over again that these are decisions that he wants to leave to the governors. And in that message, when you are leaving that to the local government, that also resides in the hand of the people of those local governments as well. And that is something that he has expressed over and over. He has expressed, wanting to stay within constitutional guidelines here as far as decision-making processes. And he has expressed over and over in regards to things like vaccinations or testing, that not everyone will, will be okay with these decisions. And there are particular messages that have happened, not just in regards to this vaccine. I feel that there are messages that he has expressed directly to the people, since he took office and even beforehand. But these messages right now are imperative for people to understand how this process works, and take a minute to step back and one, not be so affected by these fake news headlines. And I do want to talk about some of these details in particular also, but to take a step back and not get sucked in to these fake news headlines as far as the quote, the word mandatory being inserted when we're talking about vaccines, or the fact that he has given guidance on testing due to the fact that the demand has been from local governments. And these governors, if you're not for testing, if you're not for contact tracing, it's up to you, the people, to reach out to your local governments and let them know, I am absolutely not in support of this. I am absolutely not okay with contact tracing. I'm absolutely not okay with my privacy being violated in such a manner. These are options that he has provided based on the fact that these local governments are asking for that. It is up to the local governments to ensure that the people that they're representing are in line with the decision of the states.
Do you, well, and it's interesting you mentioned the media, because I think there are some things where the media falls right into the trap of trying to trying to get him boxed into a corner. One of the subjects was, well, because he's intimated that if the governors or the states don't do the right things, that he would intervene. And then they try to pursue that to try to make him look like a tyrant. And basically, it just gives him another opportunity to reach out to the people and bypass the media. And in his message to us, by answering that question, was, it's up to you, the people of the states, to dictate what's going on in your state. And you do have the power to do that. At least that's the message that I get from him.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what I have heard on whether it's intentional, whether it's a panic mode, whether it's not really understanding how your government works, or understanding the constitutional guidelines in regards to your federal government versus your state. But I have seen a lot of fodder in regards to what people expect Trump to be doing in regards to local states, local counties even, and what they expect him to do to target a certain situation or a certain area, and take steps to stop what's happening in these local areas. And that, or they will then just jump on the bandwagon of thinking that these directives, as far as contact tracing, extended lockdowns, masks being mandatory, state or door-to-door testing, these things that people just jump on the bandwagon and immediately blame Trump for. What I see is that there is this, there's this demand to follow constitutional law until it's affecting you personally. And then when it affects you personally, then they want him to overstep the constitutional guidelines, the constitutional law, in order to stop what's happening in their area. You cannot have it both ways. That's not how this works. This is not going down like this. You have to take responsibility for what you have sat back due to the fact that you have your comforts around you, you have your basic needs met, you have your entertainment, you're in your bubble. And as long as, this law over here in this state, or this person over here, or this, false flag shooting, or whatever it might be, hasn't infiltrated your bubble, then you've continued to live your life, and you have ignored the fact that you have been complicit in letting your freedoms go. And that is what has occurred with all of us. All of us are guilty of that at one point or another. And right now, we're going to pay the price if you keep ignoring the fact that you all have a responsibility here. We're all going to pay a price for that.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing that's coming out is there really is a lack of knowledge of the Constitution and the way that the framers set it up, because they put the power in the hands of the states. And that's basically what Trump is telling us. The power of this whole thing is in the states' hands, which means the people. And that's the way the framers set it up. The Constitution, you would think the Constitution is a 300-page book, but it's not. It's very short. It's very sweet. It's very to the point, and it's limited government. And the power is in the hands of the state. And that this is a lesson that we need to learn if we don't already know it. And we need to exercise those rights and those powers that are vested in each of the states. And that's what's going to get us through this. And Trump is telling us that.
Absolutely. And I'll say to those same people that, you want to jump on what different Trump train is in town for you at the time, whether it's one, going in your direction or not. The fact of the matter is, you should not speak out of turn unless you do a thorough examination of everything that Trump has done to ensure that we, the people, are gaining back our power and gaining back, you know, our constitutional protections along since he's taken office. And all you have to do is research, you know, the executive orders that he's put in place, you know, the legislation that has taken place, his action on education, healthcare, mental health, you know, law enforcement, all of the partnerships that he's created, all of the economy, stimulation, wanting to bring all, you know, production back into the U.S., limiting access. A big problem right now, which people don't understand, is happening behind the scenes in regards to, you know, you want to talk about infiltration. We have been infiltrated by China for decades upon decades, and it was the last administration set it up supremely for them to come in and take over. And, you know, there has been a concerted effort by Trump in regards to our technology in particular and space in particular to limit access to the United States by China and Russia in particular. And these are things that are occurring. You can go and research acts that have been put in place by Congress. You can research executive orders. There was a Technology Protection Act that he signed and issued today, as a matter of fact, that protects our you know, our technology, everything to do with us technology. I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, and I'm trying to multitask here, but there are steps being taken by him. I swear, you know, it has to be every minute since he's been in office, you know. And a big thing that he did do to provide protection for us is how he, you know, the deal that he did make with China and our exports to them, and the amount of money that they would have to pay in order to have a trade deal with us. I mean, that was a big protection for us, you know. But there's also been a ban on Chinese technology, Huawei and ZTE in particular, that, you know, that I've looked into in depth, and that was a very dangerous position that we were being put in regards to not only it's, you know, people think that that's just about 5G, but, you know, it goes much further than 5G. There, you know, it has to do with your privacy protections, geospatial data. You know, it boils down to the fact that China would know what your move is before you do. And that's a fact. I mean, you can go out and research that for yourselves and see everything that Trump has done to protect the American people. And if you think that this virus isn't right in the middle of all that, you're fooling yourself, because, you know, it's all related. It's all related.
Yeah, and with Google, with Facebook, I mean, Zuckerberg has shown himself to be nothing but a stooge for China.
Facebook is DARPA.
Yeah,
I mean, that's, you know, they are collecting information on you. They're listening to you. They're, you know, they're capturing your photos that you share. You agreed to it when you signed on for the account.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, you know, some of these things, and what you're talking about, you know, we can broaden that out to the TPP and NAFTA, the Paris Climate Accords, NATO, the UN. I mean, all these, all these things are to put us all into one basket and to take our sovereignty away from us. And Trump came in and got us out of the Paris Climate Accords. He changed NAFTA to I forget what it is, but it's Canada and Mexico and the United States. He got us out of the TPP. And see, these agreements, what they do, they're considered treaties, some of them, where they basically bypass our rights, our constitutional rights as citizens, and they put the decision making into the hands of unaccountable, unelected bureaucrats. And that's the Rockefeller Rothschild model, business model. So we've got to resist that, because we are, I think us in the United States sometimes we tell ourselves that we're the freest country in the world and all those kinds of things, but we don't fight for our freedom. And we are really the beacon of light and hope for the rest of the world. We have to go back to our founding, why our country was founded, because people fled Europe. People fled places where there was tyranny, where there was monarchies, where there were, they didn't have rights. And so they came to the New World to establish that. And, Britain, the British followed them here and they set up shop. And that's what the revolution was all about. No taxation without representation, the Boston Tea Party, Lexington and Concord, all those things. So, if it's going to be good for you to go back and review the American Revolution in the late 1700s, do it. And maybe that will give you the feeling of what they were going through. And they just said, we're going to fight for our freedom. And that's exactly what they did. And when they set up the Constitution and they set up the framework, it was basically giving all the states their rights. And the limited federal government was set up in just that way. And in almost 250 years, that whole model has been flipped upside down. Now the federal government, through the DC corporation, runs all the states. And the way they do that is with the purse strings, with the money. I mean, I've talked about the comprehensive annual financial statements, and anywhere from 25 to 40 to 50% of certain states' revenues comes from the federal government. And if you don't think strings are attached to that, then you're crazy. Okay. And that's how the federal government controls the states. And so, it's interesting. We're talking about the governors, and I got a big surprise yesterday or today, but as it looks like the governor of Texas now is one of the bad guys. And I always thought he was a good guy, but it looks like he's one of the bad guys because he wants to continue to lock his state down. So that's very disheartening. But, ever since Trump took office, or even before he took office, this has been a whole reveal. All of the stuff is being revealed. It's being revealed on a daily basis. The Flynn stuff in the last couple of days has been a reveal. And there are going to be more reveals that are going to be coming fast and furious over the next weeks and months. And so this is the ammunition. This is the education that the people are going to be getting. And so the question is, what are we going to do with that information when we get it?
I think this is a prime opportunity too well, first of all, as far as Texas goes, I've had my reservations about Texas and the governor since the El Paso shooting, personally. So that's always been a bit of a reservation for me. But I do think that right now we are going to see more of this. We're going to have more transparency as this goes on, and the push for reopening our states and the economy. These people will reveal themselves, and this does remind me, and I haven't had a chance to share this with you yet. Well, we've talked about it, and I'm sure a lot of people in the chat have seen this, but there is a video in particular with Pompeo where he speaks to, he's at a governor's conference, and he speaks in particular about the Chinese influence and research that they had done on each and every governor, and as far as how responsive they would be to, I'll just say it, to infiltrating their local governments.
Yes.
And, this speaks a lot right now. This speaks a lot, to how much infiltration might actually have occurred at each and every state level. And I think there might be some surprises to people as to how entrenched we really are as far as your local governments in international deals that can be quite dangerous for the people, for the local people of those governments. And I will say, there are even states, and I can speak to this in particular. I want to just tell a little story right now, if that's okay, which I've shared with you. But
yeah.
our recent issue, our recent panic button that was pushed over the last couple of days to the last week is the fact that we were under the impression, or we were given the impression by the fake news, that we are going to be we're going to be in trouble because we are not going to have a food supply. Our food supply is going to run out. We're going to have a shortage. And I want to give a little timeline on this, if that's okay, because I will give you an exact example of why I think, you know, that was another part of the puzzle here. It was planned from the get-go, as far as this whole agenda-driven issue that we're all having to deal with right now. And I believe the food shortage was, it wasn't well, the virus isn't working, so let's come at this from a different strategy. To me, it was part of the rollout from the get-go. It was just maybe the timing was a little off, because I believe the timing was a little off as far as the virus goes itself. But we've been told, you know, that there was a food supply issue. We've been told in the last week or so that processing plants had to shut down due to these massive outbreaks that happened. And there was one in particular in Iowa. So I will tell you that I know personally from a personal source that farmers, in particular cattle farmers, and I am talking large farmers, large farms that provide a massive amount of livestock for these processing plants. They were told weeks in advance that they were not going to be able to continue to send their livestock to these processing plants. They were going to shut down production. And if you think about this, you know, this isn't something that could happen in a 2 or 3 day time span, you know, where farmers would be notified of this because all of a sudden they have outbreaks. I mean, this food is processed well in advance. You know, you're not talking that this is a 2 or 3 day time frame where, you know, farmers would be notified and then, you know, all of a sudden the plant's shutting down the next day. We are talking about, you know, weeks in advance to notify these farmers that they would not be able to continue to send their livestock. So I know in particular, due to a personal contact that has a business relationship with a very large cattle producing farm in Iowa, and that farmer specifically stated weeks and weeks ago that he was informed that these plants would no longer be accepting production and that they would have to be euthanizing their animals because he was going to have to spend $15 million to continue to feed these cattle. And it was just a decision he had to make from a business perspective because, you know, they aren't pets to these farmers, you know. They're, that at that point, they become a liability due to the fact that, you know, there was going to be no payout in addition to this, you know, this expense of having to continue to feed these animals, that he was informed weeks and weeks before the public knew anything about the shutdown of these processing plants. And so they were then going to make the decision to euthanize. Now, if you go back and you think about the timeline of when these plants occurred, and I will tell you, you know, there was a claim of a large outbreak in a Tyson plant in Waterloo, Iowa. And the governor of Iowa said, we are absolutely not going to shut that plant down. That plant provides 1/3 of the pork for the entire country. We have to make sure, we have to ensure that they keep their doors open. They sent 3,200 National Guard members to that plant to ensure that they could, you know, provide assistance with cleaning and safety measures and, you know, assistance for the workers so they could continue to keep their doors open. And this all happened in a matter of, I think, what, a 3-day time span. And so there was a concern with the outbreak, but they were keeping their doors open. That was a promise that the governor made. Trump was then asked at a press conference, I believe it was the following day, and he was asked in particular about, you know, is our food supply secure? And he said 100%, absolutely secure. The very next day, we then get the, you know, the information. We get the information from the fake news that, well, these plants are going to close down indefinitely due to the fact that, you know, they're so concerned about these outbreaks. Now, I am going to tell you, matter of fact, without a doubt, I know that these farmers were notified well in advance that this was going to occur. So
Surely
it's another strategic move.
Surely you aren't saying somebody had foreknowledge of this whole thing, are you?
I am absolutely saying they had foreknowledge, and it was part of the plan. And in my opinion, this is my opinion part now, but my opinion is that it's not a coincidence that Bill Gates, you know, has a large investment in cloned meat, you know, cloned produce.
Mr. Vaccine himself, right?
Yeah, I don't think that that's a coincidence by any means. You know,
Yeah.
You know, you take over our healthcare. You want to ensure that, you know, that your vaccination program will make millions by mandated vaccinations, and then you also want to step right in and step right up and try and you know, shove your fake meat down our throats. And I do mean
Fake
process.
Yeah,
Fake
yeah,
meat.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. You know, it's
You know,
interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. You and I have talked about this before about the food supply. And, you know, we have people, I mean, I've had people, and I'm sure you have too, maybe talk to you or ask you about it. And, you know, it's just like you laugh because they have got this planned out so many years in advance that people just don't have any idea unless they're from the Midwest and they know the farming and they know that industry. They have no idea. They act like we have about a 2-month supply of food on hand, and it's just ridiculous. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And they can put that information out there, and again, it's nothing but fear. It's all fear mongering. And of course, I think this would be a good time, and then I'll let you go on, to interject that this is the model that they use in so many cases, where it's present the problem, wait for the reaction, and then come in with the solution. Yeah.
right.
And this is textbook here. And so, are we going to fall for this for the thousandth time, or are we going to stop it, and are we going to do it different this time? And that's the thing before us now. You know, I want to say that we are going to come on again next week. We are going to be maybe more consistent with our podcast, so we're not going to cover everything tonight. We want to hit a few highlights. If there's anything more you want to add to that subject, I would like for you to. And then I want to ask you: Did you want to go into anything about the stimulus plans, or do you want to save that for the next one?
Well, let me finish this thought here.
Okay.
As far as this in particular, and I'm not sure about everyone else in the country. I'm not sure what you're experiencing, but I will tell you that locally, even though, you know, we all know that Trump stepped in, you know, he used the Defense Production Act and said, no, absolutely not. You're essential. You know, you are keeping your doors open. This is not happening. You know, he railroaded the plan, right, to be able for these packing plants to try and shut their doors. Now, however, even though that has occurred, what is happening, because, you know, we still have these mainstream media stories that cause this panic. You know, we still have, you know, these local stores that are still going along with this plan. And this is where, you know, you can't allow that panic mode to take over, because even though he stepped in and he said, no, this isn't happening, you're going to keep your doors open, there are now new policies in place at local grocery stores where they are limiting your every single type of meat you buy. They are limiting your purchases now, and maybe that's something that has happened for other people in nationwide and other places. That hasn't happened here, and it is happening now. And I am in a state that never technically closed, okay? And they are now trying to limit that meat. And so we're talking about at the local level with your local grocers, where they have been told that they are to limit purchases for people for the meat in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is, as we have claims of these actions taken in particular by local governments, by our governors. And mine in particular is one that claims we didn't close down. And I will tell you right now, there isn't much of a difference between a state that claims they're not closed to a state that's closed, with stay-at-home orders. Not really much of a difference, because you can't go anywhere. All the places are still closed down, with a few minor exceptions. But now I am seeing, steps that are being taken in reverse of being proactive about opening. And, and again, I'm in a state that never closed down. Now, has been a concerted effort in the fake news, I will say, where, there have been highlights about my state in regards to, this major concern as, this was one of the states that never closed down. And now they're one of the leading states as far as the increase in cases. And they want to highlight that by saying, it's due to the fact that they never shut down, which is complete BS, because what the actual information is that, I'm in the state where this large claimed breakout occurred, where there was a large influx of cases based on, no safety measures in place at this meat packing plant. And they also failed to disclose the fact that over half of the deaths in my state occurred in 2 nursing homes in particular. So, these are examples to me of, where I can attest personally that the information that's being shared is not correct. It's not correct. It leads you down a path to believe something completely different. And then, even though that's the truth, you will still see an impact of these fake news stories, in your personal lives. As far as right now, now all of a sudden our grocery stores are going to limit, the meats that you buy. It's a perfect example of what we are really, subjected to, versus what, some of these governors might be telling us, because it's what we want to hear.
Right. Well, and while we're talking about the media, I wanted to interject something here. A couple of things real quick. One thing is, and I'm not touting Fox by any stretch of the imagination, but Tucker Carlson is knocking it out of the park. So if you get an opportunity, and if you want to listen to some real news, tune in Tucker. He's on the Fox News channel. I think he's 8 o'clock Eastern time. I don't know what it is, Central and Pacific. It's, could be different there, and Mountain time. But anyway, that's one person that I think, one person that we can listen to and we can count on getting real information. And he does tell us what's really going on. And the other thing is, I noticed that there was a presser today with Kayleigh McEnany, I believe is her name. And I just want to say that I watched majority of it. She did a very, very good job. I'm glad to see someone like her up there. I was really pleased with Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I think she did a very good job as press secretary. And I just, and Kaylee, I mean, that poor girl, she was at CNN for the longest time, and she was the only conservative voice in a lot of the shows where they'd have 5 or 6 of the liberals, and she would be the only conservative, and she held her ground and did it with class. And she did held her first news conference today, and I thought she did a very good job. So I think Trump is now maybe going to start turning that over to some other people to have the press conferences. So I think that's a good thing. But I think we have to very much scrutinize everything that comes out in the news and not believe everything that we hear. Matter of fact, it's probably a good place to start is probably go just to the opposite of what they're telling you. If they're telling you A, then it has to be Z, and that's where you should start your investigation. Okay, now, is there anything else you wanted to talk about there? Because if you want to talk about the stimulus packages, and maybe we should save that for next week, because I know there's some things that you want to talk about with COVID and the Hydra word that I can't pronounce.
I do, and maybe we could, get into more detail on this next week also, because it's it's a time-consuming conversation. But I do want to point out a couple of things, and I feel it's very important to pay attention to. We've been hearing for a while now, that our death count, is highlighted all the time. We've been told our death count is, 50,000, 55,000. Now it's over 60,000. And if you look at the most recent information, and I believe this was highlighted by Q, and another source also, but it was released from the CDC, which I check the CDC site regularly. And this was information that was released as of April 16th, where the actual verified COVID-19 deaths for the country was only 11,356, where deaths with pneumonia, influenza, COVID, U07.1 or J09 to J18.9, that number is the 54,217. And it is notated underneath that these are deaths that are counted in the section, but they have not been tested positive as verified to be COVID-19 deaths. But they are counted in the death count that you hear every day beat into your head. And that also goes for cases. I've spoken in particular to that from a personal experience with my daughter, who was tested and tested negative, and they charted her as a COVID-19 patient. These numbers aren't real, people. They're not real. You have to pay attention to that. You have to understand that, that this is, it's a scare tactic. It is a real virus. There are real complications from it. But if it were able to be spread the way they claim, and if it were taking over lives the way they claim, we would all have it by now. We would all have it. We would all be subjected to this in one way or another. That's information that you can get on the CDC. It's also an attachment, I think, that was released by Q today. And I do want to mention, and I can put a link to some of these studies that I have, because another example of how manipulated these stories are by the mainstream media and health officials that have been consulted on this in regards to the hydroxychloroquine. We have studies that you can find. The average person can go out there and find these studies just as easily as I can. And I have one that was as early as 2003 in regards to hydrochloroquine used, and I'm just going to read this quick, and I probably won't pronounce all of the words correctly, because they have to make these as ridiculously complicated as they can.
And we've got it on the visual too, by the way, so it's up on the screen, so you can point out the highlights if you want.
Well, I will just say, just to read a quick excerpt from one of these studies, is chloroquine is a 9-aminoquinoline known since 1934. Apart from its well-known anti-malarial effects, the drug has interesting biochemical properties that might be applied against some viral infections. Chloroquine exerts direct antiviral effects, inhibiting pH-dependent steps of the replication of several viruses, including members of the flavivirus, retrovirus, and coronavirus. Best studied effects are those against HIV replication, which are being tested in clinical trials. Moreover, chloroquine has immunomodulatory effects, suppressing the production release of tumor necrosis factor and interleukin 6, which mediate the inflammatory complications of several viral diseases. We review the available information on the effects of chloroquine on viral infections, raising the question of whether this old drug may experience a revival in the clinical management of viral diseases such as AIDS and severe acute respiratory syndrome, which is SARS, which afflict mankind in the era of globalization. This was written in 2003. I have a good friend of mine who works for the VA. I'm just gonna, I'm happy to go over this in more detail on our next live. But I do have a good friend that works for the VA who has backed up everything that I'm researching. Sorry, my dogs want to have their say also. Backed up everything that I've researched as far as the hydrochloroquine, and says that the military has used it for years in regards to antiviral protection and treatment, and even used it as a preventative. So, and we hear constantly, and one source in particular that we heard was Fauci and his constant questioning of even considering hydrochloroquine and the use of hydrochloroquine to stop the growth of the virus in cells. And this study does go on to detail how in this particular study in 2003, which was 17 years ago, that it goes on to detail how they, how they researched the protections of this medicine in particular, as far as an anti-inflammatory, but it also, the main agent of it stops the production of the virus, and thereby that allows, something like your Z-Pak to be able to, prevent the super bacteria from growing at that point. Now, these are studies that don't tell me that, our leading CDC, our leading disease expert, and scientists in the United States doesn't have access to this information and isn't aware of it. And in particular, the fact that it's used to stop HIV replication, which he has told you over and over again that he's an expert on. Do you understand? I'm in the audience. You have to understand how terribly manipulated we're being. We're under this horrible manipulation right now. It's
it's fear mongering is what it is.
It's sick.
Yeah.
These people truly are sick. They truly are. So I'd love to go into more detail about these documents in a live here in the near future.
Okay. Do we want to talk anything about the special interview that you were going to do and put up, or do we want to kind of hold off on that? Did you want to say anything about that, or?
Well, we can.
Just the highlights. Yeah, because if we get that done, because I think that's going to be very important. It's kind of going to be breaking news to a certain degree. But go ahead and sort of just give a brief overview of what that's about, so people will know what we're gonna release.
I do have an opportunity to speak with a nurse who had signed up to volunteer and be a frontline worker in Chicago and in New Orleans. She has a lot to say, and I don't want to put words in her mouth or speak for her, but she did talk to me about recognizing an agenda-driven motive here, her concerns about treatment, her concerns about going straight to intubation and invasive invasive treatment with ventilators versus using any kind of non-invasive treatment first, the misuse of ventilators, and how they were killing people. And she did make mention of the fact that 98% of the people that she treated and intubated were African American, and she had large concerns about what she was seeing in regards to what she felt there was a motive behind all of this. So I don't want to really say more than that. I don't want to put any words in her mouth, and I want to make sure she will be for an interview. It will be anonymous because they are required to sign contracts saying that they will not speak to media.
And that that right there says a ton about it, don't you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. I think we're kind of getting to the end here, at least for tonight. Was there anything else that you wanted to end up with before we shut this down?
Well, I'm not sure when we'll do our next live, but I do think that, I do want people to be understanding and open-minded about the stimulus package. We are fast approaching that second date where we were going to be looking at a second round of stimulus assistance sent out to the Americans, to the people. We're not talking about the businesses, but to Americans. And I do really feel that it's important for everyone right now to take advantage of the opportunities that they have to save some money, whether that be to delay your mortgage payments or your rent payments, to be able to understand more about the stimulus package. A lot of people have looked at it as a government handout, or I'm not going to take your $1,200, it's a payoff for me cooperating. That's not what this is about at all. I would like to, go more into the details on, great possibilities on distribution of wealth. And I think that could be something that, could be a great conversation. And I'd like to get feedback from, the chat for that conversation also.
Yeah, because you were telling me about that yesterday, and I wasn't aware of any of that. And I know just a little bit about financial stuff, which, what you were saying kind of dovetails in with some things I know that are going on behind the scenes. And so I thought maybe we could bring that to the fore and talk about it. So next time we can talk more about COVID-19. We can talk more about the stimulus. We can talk more. Hopefully, maybe we can get an interview done, if you can, maybe by the next one, or the next one after that, the next live stream we do with your acquaintance, so that we can get that information out to the public too, because I think it's very important. They need to know what's going on behind the scenes, because they separate. If like I said before, if you have a relative that tests positive for COVID and they're in bad shape to where they need to be hospitalized, they separate you from your loved one. And we don't know what's going on in those hospitals as far as treatment goes. We don't know what they're doing with those patients. And, people are saying goodbye to their family when they go in the hospital and they never see them again. So I think it's very important that we get that information out if possible.
Absolutely, because it is important to understand that, when you have no advocate for a sick relative or a sick loved one, they are at great risk, and especially in times where, whether it's a claim, I saw a comment here a second ago about New Orleans, and I am quite familiar with the fact that you are looking at many underlying conditions that can affect, how COVID-19 might have a role in compromising your health so much that you need to be on a ventilator. But this nurse would be able to explain to you the fact that these ventilators are constantly being misused, and they are contributing to fatalities versus helping. And that is something that people need to be aware of. So I'm sorry, I'm just responding to one person in particular. I think that I just happened to see that they mentioned they lived in New Orleans. So, and this wasn't just in New Orleans, it's in Chicago. And I believe there might be, you know, some information out there about some nurses who have experienced the exact same thing, and they were volunteering on the front line in New York. So, you know, but this person, I can speak to in particular that this is a very reliable source.
And wasn't there a nurse practitioner who had a friend that gave her a report, and she came out with a YouTube this week, and then I heard where she was contacting the people who put the video up to say take it down because she had been threatened. Did you hear about that?
I didn't hear about the threatened part. I did see the video, and that was the one I was talking to in particular about the fact that there have been reports of this exact same scenario playing out in New York, and I shared that with this nurse, and she had confirmed to me she was in, you know, Chicago and New Orleans, and
New
she
Orleans,
had said,
yeah.
yes, this is true. She said this is true, is what she said. So. So I'm going to have to wrap this up. I think my dogs are going to go crazy in a second because I'm going to have somebody knock on my door. But I appreciate you having me on here, and I'm glad that we got to touch on some of this. We have so much more we could talk about, but you know, we always have another day.
Yeah, and we will talk more about this. You know, I think we've had things going on in the past that have kind of delayed us in coming rapid fire with some of these live streams, but hopefully if we can get things sorted out on other fronts, we'll be able to do these more frequently. And
yes,
so,
because I would also, sorry to interrupt you,
yeah.
but I would also like to give an update on my own particular situation and, you know, some additional experiences I had in regards to my daughter accessing healthcare. I feel that's an important story I'd like to share as well. So, and that is part of what has hindered me from being able to participate in more in live streams more often. So,
Yeah.
but we're on the road to recovery. So, you know, that's going to free me up a little bit.
Yeah. If you would be so kind as to share your personal experience with everybody, I think that would be fantastic because I've, as you know, follow it on a daily basis, and it's been just simply unbelievable to hear the horror story that you and your daughter have gone through. And you have been very courageous in your battle because you have not stood down in any way, shape, or form in any step of that process. And I think that should be recognized. And I think the example that you set, not only for your family, but everybody else should be recognized. So I will look forward to you talking about that in our next live broadcast.
I look forward to it. Thanks,
Okay.
everyone.
Yeah. Okay, guys. So another podcast number 2. We're going to wrap this up. I do want to say that, you know, if you are familiar with the White Hats, you know our website, whitehatsreport.com. Come and visit, watch out, look at our, read some of our reports that we've been putting out over the last 10 years. We do have a Patreon channel or a Patreon presence. It's White Hats Media Group. We do have a Discord channel. We have a retail store in our website. And after this broadcast, as soon as I shut this down, I will go into the Discord and we'll be conducting a little bit of a Q&A in the water cooler voice chat room. So those of you who are in the Discord group, come on in and we'll take some questions. I will be in there. If Lady Justice can break free from her real time, she will also be in there too. Otherwise, as our good friend and strong supporter and ally, Truth Bomb says, it's on to the next. Good night, everybody, and have a great weekend.